Greetings, this is a reading of the book The Airship Golden Hind. Some of the language in this book has not aged well and is indeed no longer politically correct. Take caution when listening to this visual audiobook. Footage and photography are provided by Photations. At Photation, we believe that the world would be a better place if people spent their time being creative, joining us, and practicing art so we all can be the master of art. Find our prints available at our store www.photationsstore.com. Keep our artwork alive by making a donation at photationsdonations.com. The Airship Golden Hind by Percy F. Westerman. Chapter 21 Von SINZIGS Bid for Safety. Count Karl von SINZIGS was in a particularly bad temper. He had just learned, by picking up various wireless messages, that the cat was out of the bag. In other words, the discovery of the lost observation basket had landed him in a very awkward predicament. He blamed everyone and everybody save himself. The luckless underlieutenant Hansluter came in for a very bad time because he hadn't got rid of the second bomb, the petty officer, who had conscientiously seen that the bottle screws securing the basket were properly made fast, was bullied and browbeaten because the basket was torn away. The rest of the crew, the makers of the airship, and every person having anything to do with the aerial contest also came in for abuse. The Count was also puzzled at not being able to intercept any messages from the Golden Hind after the one announcing her approach to Panama 64 had reported at Colon, when, according to the latest information, the British airship was hard on the heels of her German rival. And now, almost the final straw, came the General Wild's message declaring that 64 was proscribed and liable to be detained should she touch at any place belonging to either of the Entente nations. Fosterdijk had accurately gauged his rival's intentions. The knowledge that his guilty secret was out compelled von SINZIGS to change his plans and make for Tenerife. Once having replenished fuel, he ought to be easily able to complete the last stage of the round-the-world voyage. When about 300 miles to the westward of the Canaries, but farther to the north than von SINZIGS hoped to be, owing to a strong side drift, 64 encountered a violent storm. In order to try to avoid the worst of the terrific wind and rain, the airship began to ascend, hoping to find better conditions in the rarefied atmosphere. 64 was ascending obliquely under the action of her huge horizontal rudders, and was passing through a dense cloud when a vivid flash of lightning, followed almost immediately by a deafening crash of thunder, appeared to penetrate the airship through and through. Almost every man on board shuddered with terror. They were fully convinced that the hydrogen had ignited. There was a frantic rush for the life-saving parachutes until Underlieutenant Hansluter reassured the panic-stricken crew with the information that the gas bag had not taken fire. Meanwhile, the airship, left to its own devices, since the helmsman had abandoned the wheel, had turned 8 degrees to port, and was traveling at a rate of 120 miles an hour on a course N. PW. Von SINZIGS, who had the wind up as badly as anybody, was nowhere to be found for some time. Luter even came to the conclusion that his superior officer had leapt overboard when the alarm of fire had been raised. But after a lapse of 25 minutes, the Count reappeared, looking very grey and haggard. "I think I must have been stunned, Herr Luter," he said in explanation. His subordinate accepted the excuse without smiling incredulously. He had seen his chief bolting for his very life. He certainly did not look like being stunned. Take charge for a while, continued von Senzig. I am not feeling well. I must go to my cabin and lie down. He staggered aft along the narrow catwalk, while the underlieutenant gave orders for the airship to be brought back on her original course. It was easier said than done. The gigantic gas bag was seesawing erratically. She had difficulty in answering to her helm, and in spite of the fact that the horizontal rudders were trimmed for ascending, the airship was decreasing her altitude. Then reports began to come in from the still jumpy crew. The engineer reported that the after propeller was damaged. Another man announced that there was a large gash in the aluminum envelope and that several of the after ballons were leaking rapidly. Further examination revealed the grave fact that one of the propeller blades had fractured, and the flying piece of metal had penetrated the gas bag at about 80 feet from the after, and so great had been the velocity of the broken blade that it had practically wrecked every gas compartment in the stern of the envelope. Under Lieutenant Luder sent a man to inform von Sindek. He had to do that, although he would have preferred to act upon his own initiative. He was decidedly fed up with his arrogant and craven skipper. The Count arrived quickly. He led off by abusing Luder in front of several of the crew for having disturbed him. Then, on being told of what had occurred, he changed completely round and complimented his subordinate on his sagacity. 64's done, Herr Captain, declared Hans Luder. She's sinking rapidly. Half an hour, perhaps, we'll find her falling into the sea. We must take steps to safeguard ourselves. Quite true, agreed the Count, although there will be enough buoyancy in the envelope to keep it afloat for hours, days even. What do you propose to do? Throw overboard everything of a weighty nature, Herr Captain, replied the Unterlieutenant. We can empty the petrol tanks since we have no further use for the motors. Meanwhile, we must send out a general wireless call for assistance to all ships within 100 or 200 kilometers of us. Count Karl von Senzig thought this quite an excellent idea. At least he said so. At the back of his mind he had a hazy notion that even now there was a chance of winning the Chavez prize. There was nothing in the conditions forbidding a competitor. His ruminations were interrupted by the appearance of the wireless operator, who reported that both the transmitter and the receiver were out of action, and that the wireless cabin bore signs of having been struck by lightning. Can't you effect repairs? Demanded von Senzig. I am sorry I cannot, Herr Captain, replied the operator. A useful, wireless man you are, commented the Count caustically. The man saluted and backed away from his chief, congratulating himself that he had come off so lightly, but von Senzig was rather pleased than otherwise that the wireless was out of action. It furnished him with a good excuse to put a certain little plan into execution. Are there any vessels in sight? He asked. A lookout man had been scanning the wide expanse of sea for the last 10 minutes. Nothing in sight, Herr Captain, he announced. By this time 64 was well beyond the storm area. The sea, now a bare 3,000 feet below, was no longer white with angry crested waves, but by the aid of binoculars it could be seen that there was a long swell running. Then there's nothing to be done unless we make use of the albatross, declared von SINZIGS. I will go and look for a ship. Hans Luther and those of the crew who heard the Count's resolve received the proposal in stunning silence. They all recognized that their captain was violating the traditions of the sea and the air by being the first to abandon his command of the crew. At least 4 were capable of flying the small but powerful monoplane, so there was no excuse on that score of von SINZIGS being the only man able to take the albatross up. In obedience to a peremptory order, the crew hurriedly prepared the monoplane for her flight. The albatross, commonly used for starting from and alighting on the ground, was adapted for marine work by having 3 small floats, the lower portions of which were just above the wheelbase line, so that the monoplane could be used either as an ordinary machine or as a seaplane. In the present circumstances, von SINZIGS elected to start from the air. The albatross, suspended by a quick release gear from the underside of the midship gondola, was ready before the airship had dropped to 1,000 feet. "You will be quite safe," reiterated the Count. "I'll send the first vessel I meet to your assistance. It may be a matter of a few hours." All ready, let go. The monoplane's motor was already running slowly. Directly von SINZIGS felt the albatross had parted company with her gigantic parent. He opened all out at 130 miles an hour. He was soon lost to sight. "He's going east by north, I notice," soliloquized Hans Luther. "I will be greatly surprised if he returns to 64. And the Count was of the same opinion. He hadn't the faintest intention of flying back to the airship, nor was he particularly keen on reporting 64's predicament to any vessel he sighted. He was out to win the Child's prize. The sum went to the man who succeeded in flying round the world in 20 days. There was no stipulation to the effect that only one airship, flying boat, aeroplane, or seaplane must be used throughout the flight. Therefore, since the goal was within a comparatively easy distance, he hoped to complete the circuit in the albatross and thus win the coveted prize.